Before we get into today's episode, just a quick disclaimer. The views expressed on this podcast by either myself or any guest are their personal views and do not represent the views of any associated organization. Nothing in this episode should be construed or relied upon as financial, technical, tax, legal, or other advice. All right, let's jump into the episode.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Xerox Research. Today, the research team is back to bring you another analyst roundtable. I'm joined by my co-host Ryan, as well as Carolina from the Blockworks research team to talk about what's happening in the markets and across crypto. It's been kind of a boring week in the markets, but I think two relevant pieces of news that we had is with L2s. So Linnea, a protocol on Linnea called Velocore, a VE free DEX, was exploited and all LP funds were stolen. I think it's like $10 million in total, but from Linnea it was $2.5 million. In response, Linnea, which is consensus is L2, paused its sequencer. I think this is the first case of a team stopping their sequencer and halting their L2, and it's like the most obvious takeaway is that it's kind of a slippery slope. Obviously, stopping an exploit is good, but on the other hand, like a centralized party being able to stop the chain and decide on what is right and wrong is not ideal. I also think like this might kind of help people realize that L2s have like different trust assumptions to the L1s, and also that they have like different trust assumptions to each other. So like vast majority ignore that the current state of rollups, they're not like actually really rollups. It's centralized sequencer that you're trusting, and you're like they make sure that your money is safe and withdrawable. Plus, like in terms of L2s, like Arbitrum and Optimism have forced inclusion, which is when so usually when you want to withdraw from an L2, you have to rely on the sequencer. That's like the most easy path, but you can do forced inclusion. So you interact directly with the L1, and your transaction is included in the L1 smart contract. On Linnea, they don't have this. So if the sequencer shuts down or you do something wrong, you just become stuck on the chain. You can't take your money out. I honestly like this was kind of funny to me this morning because everybody thought that Blast would be the first L2 to do this. Like months ago, they had the Munchable, not months ago, maybe weeks ago. I honestly don't know. Timelines are so bad now, but they lost 63 mil on Munchables, like users, and on Linnea the exploit was 2.5 mil, and like that's only 2.5 mil, which is decent amount of money, but it's also like nothing in terms of crypto. It's so I'm surprised that they went to like stop for 2.5 mil. On the other hand, I saw some takes on Twitter that were like, you shouldn't do this. Obviously, like it's against the ethos, but I think it's okay to have some centralized L2s. I don't think that's like a really hot take. I think like some L2s can be a safe space where you just don't get exploited. Obviously people should know that, and L2 Beat actually have like a good dashboard for this. I should have pulled it up. I didn't. But they have one that shows like what your risks are with sequencing, centralization, etc. And it's like it kind of shows that, for example, Linnea, you don't have forced inclusion. So users should know, but I think it's fine to have some centralized L2s.
Yeah, the team also mentioned it's not like their goal is not to keep this on forever. So they won't be able to halt the chain in the future when decentralization is really like in force. And I think, yeah, people people try to always be a bit too theoretical in this industry. But I mean, we know that decentralization is like an end goal, and it's okay for the path towards it to not be like super decentralized from the get go. I think we know the teams are building and doing a good job, and this was the best solution for the users. So I think it's a bit of an exaggeration to be very concerned about what this means.
Yeah, I second that. I think that, look, most people, there's not a lot of new people in the industry that don't know what's going on. Everyone generally knows how these things work. As you said, L2Beat provides a really valuable service, letting you know the risk and parameters that you're dealing with if you put money into one of these systems. We're all adults. We know the risks generally. No one is really surprised about this, and I think that the people online who are, um, you know, pointing out that this is against the ethos, I think they're just making noise rather than being practical. Practical. They're looking for clicks, and they're not really looking to have a conversation of any substance. There are various degrees of decentralization in the industry. Pick and choose what's right for you, and like move on.
I'm gonna take the opposite on this because you guys are both agreeing, so I feel like we need some form of opposition. On the other hand, I think for 2.5 mil they shouldn't have stopped it, because you're like, we all know that there's like levels of decentralization and centralization, but you shouldn't like, you at least want to keep up appearances to an extent. Like, you want the optics. The other thing is, I think the people like getting angry about it on Twitter, I know it's like kind of clickbaity, but I think you kind of need those people, because or else it's just all devolved. Like, we know centralized is more efficient. So if you don't have those guys who are yelling, big one is like Chris Black. I don't know if Blech, I don't know how you say his name, but he'll be on under every thread just commenting like, oh, this isn't like how it should be done. And like, okay, he's a bit goofy, but at the end of the day, you need like a couple people who are a bit goofy like that, or else like it might become too centralized.
Yeah, I think it depends on who your end customer is, right? Like, I don't know who Linnea is positioning for, but for example, if you wanted a more institutional crowd that wants to trade with tight spreads, and is more of a sophisticated actor in the market, they're going to want to make sure that if the chain gets hacked, that you can shut it down and stop the hack.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be of paramount importance to them, or else you're probably not going to get that client. So it really depends on who your end customer is.
And I think the reason was also not only the 2.5 million, but that the exploiter was starting to just sell off more tokens, and with liquidity available in the pools, it will probably like affect more users than those that had been exploited, and it could kind of maybe trigger some more effects that would be later on worse for users.
Yeah, I guess they didn't think of like mass liquidation. I assume on all of those L2s, people are also levered up just because they're trying to farm as many of whatever point there is. Talking about L2s, which have a specific purpose, great segue into Arbitrum. So they have I think most people have seen this by now probably, but they had a $250 million fund that they requested from the DAO. So this would come out of the Arbitrum treasury, to earmark 200 mil ARB over a 3-year period. 135 mil of this will be for investment, so like seed rounds, and the rest would be for building grants and infrastructure bounties. On top of that, moving from, so Arbitrum is like 3 stages, just from like a high level. It's the discussion stuff, so just on the forum on discourse, and then it moves on to snapshot, and then it moves on to tally for a final vote. And in between snapshot and tally, they added an extra 25 mil for operations and administrative costs. They have been discussing this on the forums for some time, to be fair, but I think it's like, I already tweeted about this. It's way too much money. Like $250 million for gaming is, I think, like way too much money. And I don't see this being spent well. I see this being spent in like 3 ways. It's like partnerships with existing semi-dead non-crypto games. I think like Maple Story and Avalanche, even though Maple Story is not a dead game, but something of that sort. And like what they would launch would be an NFT collection or like a secondary derivative. Um, they'd give money to existing GameFi infrastructure, or like it would just a final attempt subpar click to earn games from talent, to hit KPIs. Like I mentioned, I think it just makes more sense for Arbitrum to stick to being a DeFi chain. Um, at the end of the day, I do understand like the allure of gaming, though it's such a massive industry and it feels like crypto should get a piece of it. I think there is already like so many shovels. There's so many of these like GameFi chains. or some form of GameFi infrastructure that I don't really, and I don't think they're going to use this well at all. I feel like they're allocating more than half for investment. I don't think if you're a DAO, you should be making investments. It's just, I think it's just a messy situation that they have this like desire to spend as much of the treasury as possible for some reason. I genuinely don't understand.
Yeah, it's really hard to justify a gaming specific fund in crypto today. The reason is because you really can't point to any lasting successes in the market. VC is really hard to begin with. The returns are actually quite low if you take the medians. VC gaming is incredibly niche. You probably need specialized expertise. You need a specialized network. Um, you need some real competitive advantage there. And it's not obvious to me that any crypto DAO possesses any of those advantages to like drive meaningful returns for a game fund. More importantly, like we had this conversation on Slack today. I just asked the group, what percentage of crypto games have been on mobile? The guess was less than 1%, yet almost 100% of the growth in gaming revenue since I'm eyeballing the chart right now, 2010, 2012 has come from mobile gaming. So to be that kind of like off base as an industry in gaming is, I don't know, it says a lot. It says that if this goes through, you need some real strings attached to this capital. And, just out of pure prudence, I'd say you got to scale it down. There's just the proof of concept isn't there yet.
Sorry, I was just wondering if you guys feel like it's like it makes inherently more sense, like you were mentioning, to for gaming to be in dedicated chains. Like, is that also something that bothers you, or not really?
To be fair to them, their whole push has been to launch gaming L3s. So like it would be technically on dedicated chains. I still don't like, there's so many already gaming L2s that aren't used very often, and they already have like a gaming L3 which is relatively popular valuation wise, called Zai. But I mean, even if you go on these chains, they're just, the thing is that this, like the way that I'm arguing this makes it seem like I'm against any investment in gaming. I'm not. Like there's obviously some net usefulness for crypto gaming, be it like owning your own assets, or like more intensely you're like everything needs to be on chain, everything needs to be verifiable, no exploits, no changing of minutia from devs. And I think that gaming is a good way to like definitely, like, we crypto gaming can be attractive. But my like point has been that we already have so many GameFi infrastructure. I know for a fact that they're going to spend this money on GameFi infrastructure somehow, because that's like the more attractive thing to do. um I'm just worried that, like Ryan said, I know people think that like you just chuck around seed money and somehow you get the returns. I don't see the DAO doing this efficiently. I think there's like too many incentive misalignments. There's already like massive players in Arbitrum DAO that are gaming related. I don't see like how it ends up well for users and for token holders. Frankly, I just think it would be misspent. Um, in their defense, they have been talking about this for 6 months. So like this is very late that everybody's starting to talk about it now, because they have been discussing it for 6 months, and people probably should have said something 5 months ago and said, hey guys, maybe like 250 mil is a bit much. But it's like, I don't know, they have so many incentive programs, which is fine. You want attention, you want to attract users. um I'm just worried that like if you have a very clear product market fit, and that's like offering some form of DeFi. They were doing perps really well for some time, then like perps started moving off chain into other like L1s, L2s. um and now they don't really have anything very clear, but they still have most of DeFi activity and TVL as an L2. So I don't see like why you would spend money to say, okay, like ignore the thing that I already have, and like working on that, I'm going to instead do something that's historically not been adopted very like well, at least over the past year or so, and B, like something that I've not been able to do very well. There are like gaming chains that have done well. Ronin has done relatively well, but they already have a community to them. I just think it's like, as a business, it's not a great way to approach an issue. Just chuck money at it, um, very like loosely.
What's the total size of the treasury?
Oh, I don't know, like 3 bill or something, a little bit above 3 billion. That's just based on a reply I saw, though.
3 billion.
Yeah, I mean, we had people talking about this morning, but this is one of the most like detrimental research papers ever written, definitely, because somebody wrote a research paper that the Dow can spend 800 million ARB a year and be fine, like it wouldn't impact the token price. And it's like, I don't know if that's true. Like, maybe theoretically, I guess, but like just based on optics, they've had large incentive programs. It hasn't done very well for the ARB token. So I don't know who came up with that. I don't know. In general, gaming has been kind of hell for the past year. If you're a GameFi analyst, it's just
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's pretty weird, right? Like gamers seem to be some like obvious natural first adopters for crypto. Like they spend money in the game. Like they're enthusiastic about technology. They like toying around with new systems. They'll try new things. They're technology first people. Yet, if you look at some of the earliest crypto VC notes in the industry on like where they're putting their capital, they were all excited about gaming in 2014 to 2017, and everyone was certain it was coming in 2018, 2019, and it still like really hasn't happened. I like what first principles thing does the blockchain add to a game that is clearly missing, that the market clearly wants today, that they don't have?
the thing is that gamers hate crypto. Like they legitimately hate crypto, and that's like I mean, I don't know if it's like subjectively it's a fact. If you go on any Reddit, like any gaming Reddit, or if you go on like the gaming side of Twitter, and you mention NFTs, blockchain, crypto, anything, they just hate it. I think they fell for some scam. Everybody fell for one scam at some point, and now they're just like. I also like read that it might be resentment because, like you said, they're technology first. They're very clearly like a fit. Yet none of them, or at least majority of them, never got into crypto, and then random people got into crypto and made wealth. So they're like, "Oh, this is a scam."
I think I think that the typical crypto line of reasoning around gaming is wrong because they just like fail to make the empirical observation that people don't want to um like a game is someone's escape. Like they do it for fun, they do it for enjoyment, they typically do it to like exit the real world and go and do that thing that gives them release, whatever that is. People don't want to make financial decisions in their free time. They don't want to risk capital in their free time. Like they are stressed out enough if they lose a game and there's disappointment to it. Like why should it have to come with like losing capital as well? It makes for like a really ugly experience for a lot of people. If you look at like the percentage of people like or like opinion polling about like I don't know, how much do you enjoy financial decisions, or like, stack rank like your daily activities. Like the lowest ranked activities are going to be like the financial decisions that need to be made to like keep things going. Um, people people use gaming as an escape from the real world, and like a lot of the GameFi stuff, it puts the real world like capital at risk thing. It forces it into their like free time and to their play time. And I think it's like really off putting for a lot of people.
I think like I'm very far from being any gaming expert, but from what I understand, the PMF I saw more clearly was the NFTs that you could like get your skins or whatever to be actually yours. I know people get like banned from their accounts, and maybe they spent like a couple $1,000 just like over time, and then they don't have any type of ownership on those skins. And I feel like that could be solved with crypto, but I haven't really seen it take off. I feel like that was a good narrative that made sense to me at least, but I haven't seen people caring a lot about it.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, is that you can't really transfer your skins because they're like in walled gardens, like the Steam workshop. Maybe you can trade. Like I know you can trade CS:GO skins on Steam, but that's still like like you have to do it through Steam, and then you can't do other stuff with it. Um, yeah, I think that's the main allure. It's just it hasn't picked up, and people just like apart from this whole like okay like gamers just don't want it, they want to have fun, they don't want to make financial decisions. There's also just not been any good crypto games, like at least over the past few years. It's like games that have never launched, but they keep releasing content packs or DLCs or whatever. Like Star Atlas is a good example of this. There's no game, it's just content pack on like whatever update, like oh we're in pre-alpha beta, okay, 3 months you've been there. They have like games that are very quick and like DeFi wrapped. Crypto Valleys was an example of this. It's like just pure yield farming, but some form of like luck mechanic where you have to click something somewhere. And then there's like, I think that's it. Like those are really the two big ones. Or there's like stuff that launch but never get any attention. I also like that's probably one of the key issues here as well, is that people just don't like the games that launch. Like I'm sure if there was a good game, one game that I'm excited for, and I feel like everybody in crypto gaming is excited for, is like Project Awakening. Um, they just did stage 3. I'm not sure when they're going to be moving forward with that, but they're like an actual game that I think could be interesting, but we need to wait and see. I think, Ryan, you should introduce Polymarket to us.
Yeah, so want to talk about Polymarket. Polymarket has been one of the, I'd say, most interesting but underappreciated successes this cycle in crypto. They just hit a bit of a milestone. They achieved over $60 million in on-chain volume last month, and the app has like a lot going for it from like a catalyst perspective. I guess just like from first principles, um, prediction markets on chain just makes sense, right? These are inherently financial systems. So like theoretically, like it's a great place to have a prediction market. Um, Permissionless betting like should be a thing. And if it is permissionless, you should expect deeper liquidity, which will lead to tighter spreads, better product. Um, Polymarket in and of itself is pretty interesting. They have a bunch of interesting markets that it's like, it's not just like, will Donald Trump win the election? It's like, what quarter will ChatGPT 5 launch in? You can you can bet on the timing of an airdrop. So like, will Pump.Fun drop before June 30th? And then the political ones can get creative. It's like, will Trump say the word MOG in 2024? Like that could be an interesting bet. I think Polymarket's super interesting because they're in a really tight spot as far as like go to market, where the way I think about these crypto startups is that they kind of have to start crypto native in order to survive. And then if they want to get to substantial size, they need to build for something beyond crypto. And that's like obviously how they've started, right? Like they have crypto related betting on there, like what I just mentioned with tokens. Like it's on Polygon, you can connect your wallet, so they are building for a crypto native audience. The problem I think is that crypto native audiences don't like capped payouts. They like uncapped upside. So there's something just like that's a hump that the team needs to get over. But then there are a bunch of tailwinds, like near-term ones. Like first is just like wallets and stable coins are in more hands than they've ever been. Popular culture is like very political, especially in the United States. getting increasingly so. Politics is seeping into all areas of life. You kind of can't get around it. And if people are politically interested, they might want to bet on those things. Betting is obviously more accepted in US culture today than it has been historically. And the really interesting part is there's like a lot of political volatility in the United States and globally right now, which bodes well for these kind of markets. So if you were to imagine a scenario where it's like, in the United States or in most countries, like the incumbent party has like 7%, 70% of the popular vote, like there's not much to bet on, right? Like the decision, like the next like ruling party has been decided. However, in the United States, it's 50-50, and the players have a lot going on. Biden and Trump both have age issues. Trump has legal issues, and there are betting markets on all of those things, right? So the environment for an app like this is like super interesting, and I think it's like pretty well timed. So yeah, I'll kick it to you guys. What do you guys think about Polymarket?
I think that uncapped thing makes a lot of sense because at the end of the day, like, why wouldn't I just buy Trump or Bowden on Solana instead? So I think that'll be the issue. But I agree with you. Like, I think Polymarket's one of those. It's like a good app. It's something that you can very clearly has a PMF. Especially like since they are appealing to the most financialized and like risk-on crowd in the world. They also recently raised, as far as I can tell, so I'm sure like they'll get more and more activity as that becomes like more widely spread and people find out about it. I assume they'll do a token, but they raised 70 mil, which is kind of I think that's a lot for a betting market, especially. I'm not sure, like crypto has ruined valuations for me and like what assets should be raising, but it's quite a bit of money. um, I don't have any hot takes for this. I completely agree with everything you said. I can't do any opposition.
Well, the hot take, and I know we don't want to talk about it every week, but we're going to inevitably, is that like the biggest competitor here are meme coins. The biggest, the more interesting, the more fun. They have uncapped payoffs. Um, they're far more entertaining. Do you want to bet on whether or not Trump will say MOG in 2024, or do you want to buy the Trump or Trump and MOG coins? Like, it's a pretty similar experience to do both. I think there's more friction buying, or I think there's less friction buying the meme coins, and I know you can let it ride it and just make a lot more.
Has there been a lot of like interplay between the two, or like actually betting on the coins itself on the prediction market, or kind of manipulating the markets through there?
I haven't heard anything about market manipulation, but I mean, you have to assume that someone's going to take that
Yeah.
shot at goal, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen any small caps, but I have seen like, oh, will ETH cross 3,500 this month or something. Like I've seen stuff like that before, but you can't move those.
Yeah.
At least I think most people can't. Um,
And you can probably express that bet in the market in a more interesting way and have more upside than doing so on Polymarket.
Ryan, about the uncapped gains thing, can you do options with betting? And you don't have to, if you don't know, you don't know, but I just want to find out if that's like some form of new derivative we can do.
I mean, permissionless financial markets, someone can build it, right? I haven't heard of any products like that.
I feel like that could be. Anyway.
Yeah,
Sky's the limit.
yeah, I think there's actually one more headwind here um, around these prediction markets, and maybe why some of them. I mean, we cycle through like everyone's favorite prediction markets every 5 or 10 years. There really hasn't been any lasting players, but like Polymarket kind of reminds me of the NFT space. So if you think of this comparison that people are making today, like meme coins are the new NFTs. Meme coins eliminate a lot of friction associated with them with NFTs. So like I look at NFTs like I look at the bond market. Like you have to manage all these different traits and characteristics, and it doesn't bode well for liquidity, and it adds a lot of complexity to the process. Whereas a meme coin is just like one thing and very fungible, and you don't have to think too much before doing your thing. if you were to, and like similar in the case of Polymarket, if you were to go on there right now and you wanted to bet on whether like Trump going to jail, and you should type in Trump jail, there are 3 different Trump jail bets, and it all depends on the timing of when he gets into jail, assuming he does, right? So like there's just, again, versus meme coins, there's just like a little bit of complexity and friction when I think about like the apps that I'm on, like using on a day-to-day basis on my mobile device. Like none of them have that much friction. Like I'm swiping on TikTok, I'm swiping on Instagram, I am clicking buy on Mother and Jenner. I don't have to think about much. Polymarket makes me think a little too much.
My argument for this is that if you are, let's say you are like, you're excited about Trump winning the election, whatever, it's November, you want to buy Trump. If you buy the wrong Trump, you have to work for the rest of your life. If you buy the right Trump, because there's a million tokens, so that's, I would say, I mean, I don't know if that's friction though, because it's not hard. Like, you don't have to do any thinking. You just have to make sure that you pick the right one, or else your descendants will have to go to a 9 to 5.
Yeah, there's friction around the early for the early entrance into the markets for sure, but after some time, like there tends to be like that obvious coin, right? Like there are, like you said, there are probably thousands of Trump coins, but I think there are like 2 or 3 that are like actually getting the volumes, and you can like easily filter those. So yeah, I mean that's friction, no doubt, but I don't think it's comparable to what I see on Polymarket today.
We're once again talking about meme coins again.
We're never gonna stop.
This is like a month in, 2 months in, maybe. I don't know. I don't have anything else to say about meme coins. I think we're at the thing is, you can also never call top on these because there's likely no top. I do want to say that it is like, I think the Jenner and Mother trend, the ones that you mentioned that you were buying on the podcast, which is not financial advice, is like definitely the thing is, I want to say frothy, but it's probably not. Like, it's probably still fine. It's just like, I think it's getting less and less attractive for most people. One thing I saw is that Pump Fund is now, I didn't know this, I assumed they've always been doing this, but I just found out is that they convert all of the revenue they make in Solana directly to USDC. Now, it's not a lot of money right now. I don't know how much money they're making, but I think it's like 30 mil, 40 mil a month, maybe. It's a lot of money for a pumped up fund, but it's not like incredible sell pressure. But I'm kind of wondering why they do that. I feel like, I mean, I guess if you're a business, you want to hold cold hard cash, not Solana. But like, I've read some people say it's a bit extractive. I think it makes sense. Like, you want to be able to pay your developers or whatever. But
yeah, the less crypto, the bigger the industry gets, the less crypto native it will be. You're not going to see people holding large quantities of the native token. They're only going to keep as much as they need to pay for fees. Yeah, they're going to convert their SOL to USDC, especially in a 5.5, front end rate environment. Like, it just makes a lot of sense. They don't need a lot of it for OpEx, and they get a decent yield on it.
And it makes it clean as well that they're doing it always, and it doesn't spark conversation like when they suddenly sell a big amount, like they're a company managing their money. It's totally fine.
that's true. That'll be an interesting token. 200 mil annualized revenue is insane.
Yeah, I think it's 30 million cumulative since the inception of the project.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk a bit more about reasonable valuations, but before we move on, let's have a quick word from Stargate. Thanks to our fantastic sponsor, Layer Zero. I need to redo that because I said Stargate instead of Stargate. All right, we'll talk about that a bit later. Before we move on to more questions, let's have a quick word from Stargate. Thanks to our fantastic sponsor, Layer Zero.
All right, guys, for this week's Layer Zero segment, we have Angus, Foundation Lead at the Stargate Foundation. Stargate is a fully composable liquidity transport protocol that powers omni-chain DeFi. Thank you so much for coming on, Angus.
Thanks for having me on. Been a long time listener, so excited to be on here.
Thank you. I think Stargate doesn't need an introduction, so I'm just going to get straight into it. How does Stargate utilize Layer 0 to power its product?
Yeah, so I mean, Stargate was the first and actually still the largest application built on Layer 0. And so, as you kind of said there, it's essentially like an omni-chain liquidity layer. And so if you think about a user who wants to move token from chain A to chain B, their assets are deposited into pool on chain A. A Layer 0 message is then used and passed from chain A to chain B. Assets are released from a pool on chain B and then passed into the user's wallet. And so, as I said, it was the first application built on top of Layer 0. I think it's done about 35 or 40% of Layer 0's messaging volume at the moment. Deployed now on 13 or 14 chains. And so allows users basically to move assets between chains utilizing Layer 0 as kind of that messaging protocol in between.
How has activity and traction been over the past few months? Like, what kind of volume are you guys seeing on a month-to-month basis?
Yeah, it's been incredibly impressive, I have to say. I think Stargate has really found some good product market fit. It's really grown to, at the moment, is the largest bridge in DeFi. And kind of every new chain that the DAO deploys the protocol to grows to become the largest bridge within that chain, within that ecosystem. So I think the month of March, recording this in April here, the month of March saw almost all-time high volumes with $3.1 billion of volume. Stargate at the moment has done over $36 billion in global volume, kind of since its inception, which is just about 2 years ago now. So I think it's really, as I said, kind of found product market fit, and as it expands to new ecosystems, really becomes kind of the dominant bridge into that ecosystem. And that's across all of the asset pools that Stargate has. So kind of the regular stablecoins, USDC, USDT, ETH pools have really picked up significant volume. And Stargate is actually kind of the main interface for bridging Layer 0's token standards, the OFTs. So STG, the token, was the first OFT. And I think the OFT token standard has really seen significant adoption. Most recently, again, recording this in April, Athena is USDE launching as an OFT and bridging into Mantle. I think it did over $250 million of volume over 2 days, and all of that was done through Stargate as well.
Nice, that's great to hear. And I know Stargate facilitates a lot of like the OFT transfer, so super great to hear that that's been popping off. One last thing that I've personally been excited about for a really, really long time. I know Stargate has some exciting updates coming soon. Would you care to share a little bit more about this Stargate V2 that I've been hearing about?
Yeah, for sure. I think we've spoken about Stargate V2 within the community, within the DAO for a long time. I think Stargate, as I said, it's been live completely immutably on chain for over 2 years now. It's done $35 billion of volume. I think a lot of the things that Stargate V1 was built for, I suppose the DeFi ecosystem has changed. So, Stargate was built for a world with maybe, 10 to 12 chains. It's now live on 13 or 14. The world that we're seeing today is really a world of 50 to 100, maybe even 1,000 rollups. And so the protocol is kind of in need of a bit of a change. And so that's what we've done with Stargate V2. And I think Stargate V2 actually brings a whole bunch of things. I'll try and run through them quite quickly. But the number one thing I think that the market has shown is that users really care about cheap transactions, cheap bridging. And so Stargate V2 is now the cheapest bridge in DeFi, which is super cool. That's been done in a number of ways. Firstly, the protocol was rewritten to be super gas optimized. And the second thing, and I think relevant to this conversation, is that it actually introduces batch transactions as well using Layer 0 messaging. So Stargate V2 is built on top of Layer 0 V2. And what this means is essentially, if you think about users moving from, for example, Arbitrum to Optimism, they can now choose to, and the analogy that we've been using is kind of a bus and a taxi. So a user can now choose whether they want to take a taxi, and they pay kind of the premium for the taxi, and they have one-to-one transaction messaging. Essentially, your assets are deposited on Arbitrum, Layer 0 message across Optimism, your assets are released to your wallet. Alternatively, if a user is willing to kind of sacrifice a little bit of latency, then they have transaction batching. And what that means is essentially the Layer 0 message portion, the fee for that is amortized over the amount of users that are on kind of the bus. And so a user can pay for a bus ticket. There may be 4 seats on a bus between Arbitrum and Optimism. Once all 4 seats are occupied, that Layer 0 message or that bus then gets passed over to Optimism, and those 4 messages are then released on destination. And what this means is that we've been able to reduce gas costs significantly. I think with Layer 0 V1 or Stargate V1 on top of Layer 0 V1, we saw kind of gas costs on source of about 550K, and then 220-ish on destination. And now using this kind of bus mechanism or user riding the bus is only paying about 70K on source. So it's a over 90% reduction in gas fees. Allows Stargate to be the cheapest bridge in DeFi, which is super, super interesting. The other thing I think that is incredibly important is we've launched kind of Hydra, which we've been, again, speaking about within the community for a long time, as Stargate's offering of bridging as a service, essentially. So all of these new app chains, L2s, L3s, alt L1s that are coming out and kind of have this cold start liquidity problem, they now have access to Hydra, which, as I said, is Stargate's offering for bridging as a service for a couple different assets, USDC, USDT, and wrapped ETH. And what this just means is that any application, any rollup or L2 that has a cold start liquidity problem now has access to all of Stargate's chains, all of Stargate's liquidity, all of Stargate's users. And so if you think about kind of the core Stargate pools, you have a USDC pool and Arbitrum, for example. We launch Hydra on chain X. Assets are deposited into a USDC pool on Arbitrum, and then a STG USDC OFT is minted on chain X. And the most important thing is that this OFT is kind of horizontally composable across all of Hydra chains. So the assets that a user deposits into Arbitrum USDC pool kind of sit within Stargate's core protocol. And then the OFT that then is minted on chain X can then be used across all of the different Hydra chains.
Nice. I appreciate that rundown and love the bus and taxi analogy. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much for coming on, Angus.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Ryan, do you want to introduce reasonable value?
Yeah, so I think it was about a week ago, I posed to the team, are there any coins out there like with sub $1 billion or $500 million valuations that are like legitimate projects? Like, we're looking for bargains. The reason I asked the question is that this is like my second or third cycle, depending on how you count a cycle. And it's so insanely hard to purchase something with a margin of safety in a bull market. In the previous bear, I watched like some of my favorite projects trade at like 20 to 60 times sales, which was a nice discount to where they are today. I'm seeing those same projects trade at like 1,000 or 4,000 times sales today. So if you are an institutional investor in this space, or someone with with an eye for valuation and margin of safety, it's like becomes impossible to find new things to purchase and to add to your portfolio in a bull market. So I asked that question to the team. At first, we thought that there were a bunch. Turns out there weren't that many. Luke, one of our analysts who's always on chain, I think he brought up Drift and Camino as two projects on Solana with sub $500 million FTVs.
Also across. Luke would be upset if we didn't mention Luke called the bottom of across.
And across, check out that report from Luke. And so poking around a little bit more, really surprised to see a number of core Solana projects, like these base primitives that you need that are going to generate real revenues in that ecosystem, trading at these sub $500 million valuations. I think it's really interesting for two reasons. The first reason is that Solana is very obviously one of the big stories of this cycle. Everyone knows about Solana. You've seen its meteoric rise. You've seen it best Ethereum on many and come within like top 3 of Ethereum on a lot of the metrics that matter. It's like it's a legit project that's here to stay. Yet the tokens in the ecosystem are still trading like the markets forgot about them, which makes it really interesting at this point in the cycle. The other, the other point is that there's an obvious upcoming catalyst for the ecosystem in general. And it's just like the Fire Dancer upgrade, right? You're going to have a lot more throughput there. People are going to be able to do a lot more things. Networking problems are going to be hopefully solved over some meaningful time horizon. And those are catalysts. And to see these core kind of primitives on Solana trade at these valuations is one of the more interesting things that I'm seeing today in the cycle. And I think they trade there today because of the historical consequences of outages. So, like for example, if you were to look at Solana DEX volume, I think they're number one or number two, depending on the day and the time frame. If you're looking at derivatives value specifically, they're I think top 6 or 7. So like, what's the difference there? Like the two should be pretty correlated, right? And I think that it's like sophisticated risk managers who trade derivatives on chain will not use Solana because of its historical downtime. You can't manage risk when the rest of the market is trading 24/7, but you can't trade for 18 to 36 hours, right? So, looking at these valuations, looking at these upcoming catalysts, and thinking about how market perception changes surrounding that downtime risk in Solana makes for a really interesting setup in that ecosystem.
Yeah, I don't like perp dexes on chains. I like my perp dexes separate on their very own chain. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I agree with you. I think like just based on the fact that the chain will improve will likely lead to some. I do think that like Solana DeFi is kind of in some weird spot where like the meme coins are doing so well. There's so much activity on the chain, but the like you said, the core DeFi primitives aren't doing particularly well. The one thing that was like crazy to me is Marinade. It's like at 130 mil market cap, and they have 1.5 billion TVL. And like, yeah, okay, their market share is like diminishing. Jito's obviously like the sexier coin. It has restaking. It has MEV. It has all of these fancy words, but like Marinade is still 1.5 billion TVL. It makes no sense to. I don't know. This is not financial advice, but to me, it was kind of intense because there's like very clear divide over there. Same with Orca. It's like the only usable DEX on chain. It's like Radium is horrible. Orca is the only one that actually works, and it's 200 mil market cap. It was kind of insane to me. But I think it's like, to what you said, I will say that there are actually like a lot of pretty decent protocols out there with like reasonable valuations. I just think that they are getting no attention because DeFi is getting no attention whatsoever. Like everybody's just focused on something else. Their capital's either locked up in some form of yield farming for either restaking or some new L2 or L1, or they're in meme coins. I think nobody's really spending that much time, but there's like very clear winners. I think like DMT is one, did really well over the past few months. Very clear, like it's a working product that was sub 50 mil FTV, and people were like, okay, like what else do I want? But honestly, like apart from that, I'm also a bit like shocked at how. I mean, this is another topic I feel like we always talk about. There's too much infrastructure, not enough apps, and the apps that do launch have like 8 bill FTV. What am I supposed to do with that? But I don't know, Carolina, what do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking like what you were saying. It makes a lot of sense that if these products are like fundamentally good and they should maybe be valued higher, but there is also like a very big distinction between a good product and a good token. And just because like I'm not like 100% sure what the tokenomics on Orca, for example, are, but just because it is a very good DEX doesn't mean it is a valuable token. And yeah, sorry, did you want to answer?
No, you're absolutely right. I was just gonna say it's also not a very good product. It's just the only decent DEX on. Just nobody thinks that. Anyway, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, so it's just like important to make that distinction. I don't think there are many good tokens actually driving like protocols that are driving value back to the token. It depends on like many things, and there are also regulatory reasons. But it is okay to just use a product and be very happy with it and not own its token. That's fine too. And what you were saying about Solana, for example, perp dexes, I definitely agree. I feel like when we solve Solana's issues, we will finally be able to onboard more serious derivatives traders there. And because right now people on Solana are trading meme coins, and you don't need to perp trade meme coins. I mean, that will be a bit insane if it's like Solana meme coins are traded within like 1 day of being launched and then they're back to zero. So unless you're very, very crazy, you don't really need that. What we need is actual serious traders on the chain, and it does make sense for them to come right now.
Yeah. It's also like, I mean, one thing about Solana is that they had like a really great year. Like, I think people don't really think about, apart from the token price, like just in terms of DeFi, they have had a good year. Jito's a fantastic product. Tensor is a fantastic product. Jupiter is an incredible product. Like these new DeFi and the old Solana protocols, like they're still like, I'm gonna say Radium again. I don't know how they're still in business. I mean, obviously because it's just launched, so they can't change it. But like they have had a good year with good product. So I'm hoping that like with Fire Dancer, I mean, I still like you. So I don't perp trade though, and I would even if I did, I think even if they fixed everything, I still wouldn't perp trade on Solana. I don't know why. I like a different environment for that. But I mean, they have had a good year with lots of good products. I guess, yeah, just because the product is good doesn't mean it should have a good valuation. I just think some of these, like, it makes you kind of think when you see the counterparties do so well on other chains.
Yeah, there's clearly a distinction between the product and token that, like, I think crypto hasn't figured out yet. But yeah, something like it's not obvious why a DEX needs a token, right? Like it's just people trading. A DEX feels like, especially in AMM, feels a lot more like public infrastructure than it should feel like some fee generating business. I think the drift token makes a lot of sense. I think, like Bach, which said, marinade makes a lot of sense. But yeah, there's clearly there's a distinction between good token and good product for sure, especially when the equity is taking value at expense of the token, which we see pretty often in DeFi.
Like drift's a bad product, but it might have, like, I know they're doing good stuff with Futarchy. So I think drift's a bad product. This might be a hot take, but like as far as I've seen, it's not a great product. I don't know if you guys think it's a great product.
I haven't used it. I only see it on the leaderboard on like TVL.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I used it, it was not like comparable to like Vertex, Hyperliquid, like any other perp DEX. But to be fair, all other perp DEXs I use on Solana were a similar experience. So I think it was mostly a Solana issue.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, they're also like, perp DEXs are just a difficult business to figure out if you're on a chain that doesn't have as much TVL as other people, and like you're not running some crazy incentives program, because I mean, if you're an order book, technically you should still be able to compete even without the TVL, because you don't need TVL, you just need market makers. I just think like they weren't able to attract them, and I know there were horrific liquidation candles on drift at certain points, and there's also still not that much liquidity. Pibbles always complains about drift, even though he was talking about Aptos perp dexes that had 2 assets on them. So I don't know what he was talking about. I think that's it. I think this is this week's Analyst Roundtable. There aren't that many topics to talk about, unless you guys have any final words of saving for Solana DeFi or hatred for Solana DeFi. I think we're done.
Yeah, I could just mention on, because we were talking about perp DEXs attracting. Maybe if order books don't need a lot of liquidity, but they do need a lot of users or market makers, and I think it hasn't really gotten the attention it deserves yet. But Vertex, with their new Vertex Edge, I think it is a good idea. They have a sequencer off chain that basically lets you create a Vertex Edge instance on any chain, and liquidity is just there from day one. So basically, you have different front ends, but you can connect to them, and you see, like, if I connect to Vertex on Arbitrum, I see the same order book as if I was connecting to Blitz on Blast. and that is a really cool feature. So it's not really just launching on many other dexes, is really having a unified source of synchronous liquidity that I think can solve a bit the problem of fragmented liquidity across Vertexes and dexes in general.
Okay, I have a couple questions about this. First of all, is this just for the, because as far as I understand, they're hybrid. They do both order book as well as like an AMM style, right?
Yeah, it is mostly like a fallback mechanism. So, for example, if the sequencer, because it is off chain for some reason, something goes wrong with it, it falls back to the AMM. But in general, yeah, it always tries to, it always gets you the best price, so you can be connected to the AMM. You can also choose, like you can also say that you don't want to have anything to do with the off-chain sequencer.
Interesting. I think that's definitely like the clear path forward for any protocol is to do. I mean, ideally not off chain. Ideally, you want everything on chain, but like some form of fixing up this liquidity fragmentation issue. I always thought it would be at the wallet level, to be honest with you. But like, if apps want to try and tackle it, that's fine as well. But it's just like, especially for something like Vertex, which did really well because of Arbitrum, really. But they want obviously as many users as possible, and some people don't want to be on Arbitrum; they have money elsewhere. So I think like it's definitely the right approach. We'll see. I've become enamored with Hyperliquid for some reason. It's the first perp dex. Wow, it's the first perp dex that I traded on, and now I can't give it up.
No, but I understand what you mean, and it works like really, really well, and you don't feel like it's a very big thing to be bridging onto the specific L1. It works like super easily. But I think it's also like, I think they're fundamentally different approaches, and it's interesting to see them take off. But because Hyperliquid basically is like assuming, okay, we can do the best perp dex. We just need to onboard like everyone here, and we will have most liquidity and best execution. While Vertex is just assuming, okay, everyone will be on different chains for different reasons. We accept that, and we will just try to give a unified order book to anyone that wants to trade on their favorite chain. So it's fundamentally different, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I wonder which one will work out. I feel like the Vertex one is very in general, I think that idea is very good. I like Hyperliquid, but I'll need to try out Vertex. I thank you guys for coming on, Ryan and Carolina. I really appreciate it. I wish you all a very good day.